All right, welcome back to the program. Dr. Hassan Mahmud is joining me right here. Of course, if you're a regular viewer of this show, you would know his face now. At least you see him like 6 times in a year. If you don't get to see him at all, you see him 6 times in a year. Dr. Mahmud, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome from Lagos.
Yeah, thank you.
The MPC went to Lagos this time.
Yeah, we had a retreat before the MPC proper.
Yeah. Why was that retreat necessary? Because when I saw that, I was like, hey, what's happening now? Are the issues so so deep, and, you know, what did you go for a retreat for?
Normally, MPC members are supposed to have a retreat every other year, or where possible yearly. And the retreat is supposed to kind of an evaluation session, look at events that have occurred through the period, actions that were taken, the outcomes of those actions, how are targets met, what are the tools that need to be refined, what are the new ways to think through the issues. And people also, it gives the MPC members, you know, forum to also speak to the directors, the technical guys that are involved, what are the issues that you are seeing. You know, we also have some Chatham House kind of discussions there, frankly, you know, bringing out those views that are salient there around monetary policy, decisions, implementations, challenges. We have international speakers that also come in. The governor of the Bank of Kenya was there.
Oh.
We have people from the BIS.
Njoroge
was there. Patrick Njoroge also
He's
spoke.
also having his own
issues.
Yes,
fair share of those issues. Inflation is also rising there. And the IMF, the director, Abebe, was also there. Bank of International Settlement also spoke there. We have private sector speakers there. It was around the digital evolution and how monetary policy is playing in that space. So a lot of discussions went in there, and we also had fun. You know, MPC members also had fun.
So you had to like relax a bit too.
We relaxed a bit. We have a bonfire event. People dance and enjoy themselves and come back to business again on Monday to deal with the inflation quagmire in the system.
Was it that this retreat, let's dwell with the retreat a bit, was it that this retreat also was held as a result that perhaps things are going out of hand? Because when I saw that, I was like, oh, okay, Emefiele and his men, and perhaps women, the many wise men now, and a few women in it, you know, are they taking time off to study what exactly has been? Because it's really been tough.
Yeah, like I said, it's an appraisal session, you know, an evaluation of, you know, how things are now, what the MPC members have done, looking at the outcomes, the current or the prevailing economic conditions and financial environment, how has the policies been implemented helping. There are complementarity of policies, both conventional monetary policy tools and the unconventional monetary policy tools that have been used, and the need to start looking at which is more potent at this, because the fundamentals are also changing very fastly. So the emphasis has been on driving growth since we just came out of recession by the third quarter of 2021. And the concern then was growth. So let's get growth, let's get people keeping their jobs, let's get businesses running, let's get employment on, food on the table. Now we see the elephant in the house, now inflation trying to wipe up that welfare benefit. So there's a need to, okay, let's slow this side and pick this one and deal with it quickly. Otherwise, you will just, it's like, you know, the rate, the inflation is now gradually moving from crawling, you know, to galloping, and, you know, it's becoming persistent, you know. So it was important that members also, you know, evaluate that and see that, okay, what do we need to do differently to really address this head on. So it was both of them, but like I said, it's something that's normally, even without any issues, is supposed to happen, you know, because they are planned within the MPC calendar to have that retreat for members to, in a different mood, to, you know, look at things again and evaluate how they've performed. And I think the consensus there was that, well, they've done very well given the in relative terms, given the challenges on ground, given how Nigeria has also fared compared to other countries of the same kind of macroeconomic characteristics. And so it was a kind of a pass mark for themselves, but with the caution that there is still a lot to be done. And there was a need to face that very quickly.
So after the retreat on Monday and Tuesday, MPC met. Yeah. On Tuesday, you came out with the decisions as read by the Governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria. The CBN's MPC has been hawkish, at least in the last two meetings, May and July. Why have we seen this?
Yeah, it's been tightening, yeah. We've moved from more of a hold stand to now a tightening stand, and three things are playing out here. And like I said earlier, issues around growth and issues around inflation. The primary mandate of the central bank is price stability, and monetary stability, conducive for growth. We've seen the growth to a particular level. You know, it's positive. We're out of the recessions. We're doing over 3% growth year on year. Inflation numbers are jumping. You know, we started crawling at just 10 basis point, 15 basis point month on month, to now having 100 basis points. The last one was 89 basis point month on month that we're seeing. So those were big jumps. In the May MPC meeting, the rate, it was clear to members that there was a need to just rein in inflation or tame inflation immediately. Otherwise, you know, the recovery we even got from that growth, the growth recovery, will be wiped out, will be eroded. More importantly, inflation impacts more on the vulnerable groups, on the poor, you know, in the sense that people meal calendar start changing. It starts seeing gradually people cannot take bread again. People cannot eat rice again. You know, you start seeing that deterioration going in, people falling more into poverty line. So there was a need for that little income you have to have some value that you can be able to still maintain your utility preference, or what the things that you eat, you live on, your expenditure pattern is still sustained, particularly around feeding, having a house, meeting some health problems, and then also education. So the essence was, one, to, you know, sustain the resilience of that disposable income, that money you have to spend. The value of that money is very important. And when you get that going, then you start seeing people having jobs, retaining their jobs, being able to feed their families. You see social disorders and crises within the environment or the society reducing substantially, because when people don't have jobs, they don't have food to eat, you start seeing, you know, some crisis within the social environment. And so it was more on that side. The second side of it is looking at the investment patterns, you know, looking at the cost of funds, looking at how are you able to, you know, rein in some of this excess liquidity within the system to go into investment purposes, you know. So the more the return on those investments, the more the incentive for the individuals, the investors, to move these idle funds into investable products, which will make those funds available for those that will also do production and productive activities. So you see that savings mobilization, investment mobilization is improving because of this. If there's too much of this liquidity within the banking system, it deflates the money market. Money market at these rates that banks interact with themselves, it deflates that rate substantially. So banks are not interested in, you know, interbank transactions, lending money to each other, because the value is extremely very low, because everybody has the volume of that. So the money market rates go down substantially, which will include savings rate. So people are not incentivized to bring in their money for savings. The money that has been saved is what the banks now lend to people to, you know, do businesses. So credit is tied to, you know, the deposit volume that the banks have. That's why we have the loan to deposit ratio, where banks encourage, central bank encouraged banks to lend at least 65% of their fund, total fund to the economy to drive this growth and expand credit within the sector. So we are looking at those group of people, those investors and players in that field, and we're also looking at the vulnerable group, the general population, the households and the individuals. And the emphasis now was more on getting the value of the money within the individual's income, within the individual's enough to meet their daily requirements. So it was, the emphasis was growth is still there. GDP output growth is still an issue that we looked at so that we don't get that out, because if recession comes in again, then everything is back to square one. So we are looking at about there was a need to just bring down that inflation numbers.
Dr. Mahmud, let me ask you this question, and I'll play the devil's advocate.
Go ahead.
Do you think that the MPC or the CBN, which you're part of, is really looking at inflation or defining inflation or giving a market-based definition of inflation than a people perception of inflation? Because it's like, perhaps it's two things. Because what an average Nigerian is seeing now, or what an average Nigerian is experiencing, I don't know the last time you gave money to buy bread. But bread, the last time I bought was about close to 800 naira. That was about 300 naira like last year, or 350. A cup of rice is now expensive, or a bag of rice is expensive, and all of that. So is the CBN also looking at inflation as a people, there's a perception of inflation by people than this esoteric, technical, economic?
I try as much as possible to take out the technical. My previous, the conversation I just had was more on looking at that vulnerable group. And I was giving it the interpretation of, just like you gave it now, the cost of bread, the cost of living where you are still living, the cost of taking your child to school, the cost of rice. And I was saying that, right now, people have already removed bread as part of their daily menu. They removed rice out of their daily menu because of the prices. And because if you still have the same amount of money, if you earn 20,000, 30,000 every month, minimum wage every month, that same 30,000, so long as inflation is going up, will become 25,000, will become 18,000, will become 10,000. It's still the same 30,000 they're giving you, but the value in the market, if you have that 30,000, you're able to buy 10 tubers of yam, 3 modules of rice. It will get to say that you even remove the rice, you don't get that 3 modules of rice. Even the yam will come to 7. But the same 30,000 you're earning, because inflation is wiping out that income effect in that money that you are earning. So the emphasis now is to look at that side of the economy. It's very, very important. Another thing I will also want to emphasize here is that even before now, inflation was an issue. But the drivers of those inflations have changed. While there were domestic, we keep emphasizing their structural issues, infrastructure, we saw security issues came in. Then we saw cost of energy, fuel, electricity, and all that came in, because then the Russia-Ukraine crisis. Russia-Ukraine crisis is important to us because oil prices went up. Don't forget that we import finished product of petroleum, so that is transferred, even though subsidy is there, because the volume is not enough to go around, even because supply was also an issue. You start seeing that cost of transportation, particularly diesel, which is already liberalized, hitting 800, 900 naira a liter, feeding into the car, because even if you produce the rice and the yam in the villages, you still have to take them to Abuja, Lagos, Enugu, the urban areas. That cost of transport will build into it. In the analysis that central bank did, food inflation at farm's gate, that is from the farm to where the buyers will now get them, was declining. However, from the farm gate to the urban areas, to the shelves and the business, to the market, the price has more than doubled.
So
because
from the farm gate to...
prices were going down.
So for people that come to take from the farmers, the pricing they give to
Yeah.
those off-takers
Yes.
are declining.
Yes, the farm gate prices are going down because the volume of production has improved, given most of the interventions we've done. So everybody has that. So the volume has increased. So supply increased. So the prices were, going down in the sense that you don't see that skyrocketing of prices in that level. Where you see the heavy price, for example, don't forget there is also value addition. When the maize or the product of a bread is produced, it's just in the form of maize or unicorn or whatever. At that rate, those prices are still, within the comfort zone that we want. But by the time you start doing the value addition, don't forget that the factories will also need electricity, power, diesel to run their gen, salaries for their workers. So all those add-ons will now bring the price at the shelves, at the shop and the markets a lot higher. So those pass-through prices is what, and those what we call the core part of the inflation now, are what is driving this, excessive increase you see in those domestic. So the determinants of that inflation numbers, apart from the fact that, the supply was constrained before, so you don't have enough in the market, and that's why prices are going up. Now is the, input cost now that is going up. Pass-through, yes. Fertilizers, the Russian-Ukraine war also brought about issues around urea. There are a lot. I just read in your news now that government has approved the importation of a breed of wheat. So we also had a portion of the wheat that we import within the country. So that was feeding into that that prices. Even the inflation going on in advanced economies is also galloping in those spaces. While their growth numbers are going down, you see the inflation number is also rising, largely for those advanced economies related to COVID. The lockdown that they had. So the issues they have now is that a lot of people want to buy things. The supply and the delivery infrastructure is exhausted. It's not enabled to accommodate that delivery time that is normal. So you see that pent-up demand, we'll call it, huge demand standing in there. So the only thing that will happen is prices will start adjusting upward. So they are also concerned about how do you free out that supply chain disruptions and get a lot of this to the rest of the populace. And then you now have cost of petroleum products or diesel for driving the cars. So exogenous factors or external factors are playing a very big role in this space. Don't forget that even some of the agricultural or manufacturing products that we do also have importation of machineries, and so if the inflation in those advanced economies are high, that will also build up to the price.
So is it that we are suffering more of external factors being contributors to Nigeria's inflation than our own domestic factors? Because I know that the MPC kept rates for such a long time before it did raise it in May. It was not that we didn't have inflation that time. We also had inflation. But it chose to be pro-growth. So is it what we're seeing now is more of the external factors contributing? The Russia-Ukraine war that is exacerbating inflation in other countries. China is also on one hand locked down today or not locked down tomorrow from COVID and all of that. We're also seeing major central banks in the world. I think the ECB will raise rate first time in 11 years. Other African central banks may likely raise rates. Kenya, I think, is having their own MPC next week, if I'm not mistaken. South Africa is July 21 or so. So do all that parameters contribute to what we're saying?
It does, but that does not mean
which one is contributing more? That's what I'm asking.
Is it the external came in to compound the domestic, in the sense that it's a double whammy now. The security challenges that is also applying, that's also affecting supply within the domestic economy has not abated. We see that going the banditry or all those kidnappings that are not making farmers to go to the farm is still there. There are a few cases of climate conditions that are also affecting the late rain, even though we've done a lot of measures in that space to do dry season farming, to do irrigation and stuff, but there are also challenges coming in from that side. But principally is these external shocks that are coming in, cost of diesel, cost of petroleum product, imported inflation, because inflation that is coming from those side of it, the FX issues for the imported component, because the US, and like the example you gave, most countries in the last 6 months have raised rates in the average of 3 to 4 times, including the US, including Ghana, including Kenya, including Brazil, South Africa. So the Central Bank of Nigeria has actually been more cautious in terms of the speed of doing that, because as you are also raising rates, you also be looking at other indicators in the economy so that you don't hit the system. So the external factors are playing a very big role. The domestic factors are still there, and so you see that double whammy coming into that space. But like I said, the emphasis now is to stabilize prices, because these prices also include not only price of food items or the core inflation, price of energy, also include the price of fund, the cost of funds, the interest rate that is being charged in the bank for lending and credit. It also include the FX, the cost of the foreign currency. Most currencies now are depreciating against the dollar. I'm sure you heard recently that the dollar and the euro are at par now. Euro used to be a lot stronger. So because the US or the Fed is raising rate persistently, so you also see issues around the funds, the foreign investments that we have here, what we call foreign capital, are moving out to the US, where the return is now higher and where the risk factors are also a lot more moderate. Even the US is also not looking at growth now, because yes, if they do a negative growth quarter on quarter this month, technically they are in recession. But the emphasis for them, because the inflation numbers we are seeing in the US and the UK now is not occurred in the last 40 years. So they've been doing inflation numbers of 0.5, 1.2 in the last 4 decades. Now they're doing 9.1, and there are no indication that that is going to come down. So you also see the cost of living and people falling into poverty in advanced economies also increasing substantially. And the fastest way to get into poverty is through inflation.
Okay, let's take a look at this scenario and stagflation.
Yeah.
Are we in a stagflationary environment? It's here.
It's here.
Because why I asked that question, what stagflation is for the benefit of our viewers, when an economy is experiencing high inflation and the economic growth is not robust. But our economy is growing at 3.11%. At least that's the last data from the NBS GDP for the first quarter of 2022. However, that is growing at 3.11%. We have unemployment rates at about 3%. That's the latest figure that we have, unless we get a new one. Inflation at 18.6%. So is Nigeria stagflated? Nigeria's economy stagflated? Bearing in mind that economy has moved from recession in 2020. I don't know. That's really a dicey question.
Yeah. Let me explain it in very simple terms, but as it is in theory, but in simple English. Ordinarily, when inflation is going up, it means that production activities are going on, return for production is higher, so the people that are working are asking for more wages, because they see the profitability of their firm. So you now see, because of that demand for wages, the people that are selling the things, the suppliers now, build that cost of wages into the end price that they sell things to people in the general public, the cost of goods, the sales price now. They built in that price. So inflation moving up gradually, not to the maximum now, is an indication that economic activities are booming. But what we see now, the paradox we're seeing now, is that economic activities are going down, but inflation is going up. So that means it's not the supply side that is driving that inflation. It's more coming from the demand side. I hope I'm not too technical. It's coming from, the fact that you have so many people looking for something, but it is the supply side is not meeting up commensurate with the level of production that is required. In the bigger analysis, it's saying that potential output gap is still very wide. So what you see now is that the inflation numbers are going up, but it's not driven by increased in production activities. In short, GDP
it's not
output
driven
growth
by a growth in the overall economy, that everybody is doing well.
Yes. So the growth is going down and then inflation is going up.
Which
you know.
is a
Which,
serious
yes,
issue.
so that is the stagflation you just explained.
Mentioned.
Most advanced economies are already in that stage. We had experiences of this even during the COVID crisis when we went negative. But most other economies, including within the African continent, are also experiencing this. That's why the emphasis is now look less on growth and face this inflation.
More of
Otherwise,
inflation.
we'll wipe out the welfare effect of inflation.
You know that the global central banks have been blamed for where we are today, apart from the Russian-Ukraine war, because the Russian-Ukraine, yes,
yeah.
the Russian-Ukraine war just came to like add pepper to the injury, because like, okay, these are what we're seeing right now in the advanced economies as a result of so much expansionary measure, so much helicopter money. The US, they were just dishing out money during the COVID crisis. But did the MPC come up with innovative tools as a result of that retreat that you had? Because it seems now that so much is facing you all at the central bank or at the MPC in terms of inflation, and you really need to bring this down. Because I don't know the way inflation is heading, let it not go and hit 20%. In fact, a lot of people will say, Nigeria has been living, we've always known inflation all our lives, you know. So are there innovative tools to tame this? Because the MPR was touched, the AR was not touched, the CR was not touched. What innovative tools is the MPC thinking about?
See, the emphasis globally now is what we call globalization.
What? Globalization?
Globalization. There's no more globalization, you know, because trade was a major factor within that phase of globalization. So you don't limit the space, you don't limit the market. The world was a market. So even if you have a product you can produce in Nigeria, you don't have market for it in Nigeria, you can take it to South Africa and take it to Ghana. You open up the space. And the world economists agree that nobody should put restriction. Let's open up the space. The effect of that is that the shocks in other economies will come to you. So it's open door. If you leave your door open, anybody can walk into that space. And we're seeing that now that people are now running back to their shelves, you know. So instead of, you know, expansion and globalization and trade, people are now slowing down and, you know, looking inwards. The central bank is also emphasizing that. Let's look inward. The RT200 and all those things that we're doing is to look inwards, you know, and raise. So if you look inwards and you do things within the confine of your economy, not saying restrictions on trade or what do you call it, blocking other countries from punitive tariffs. No, I'm not referring to that. But when you look inwards and use the resources you have to drive your growth, the vulnerability of your economy, I mean, the exposure to those external shocks
to develop
to drive our growth, including the tools that monetary policy also have to drive the growth process, then you absolve yourself substantially from those shocks. Because the shocks we are getting now, like you just mentioned, the advanced economies during COVID, we are pumping in trillions of dollars. Now the economies are, you know, overflowed with those funds and the pent-up demand that I talked about. And inward-lookingly, they started raising rates. They started collecting back those funds within the system. No? So rates were going up. And they did that without thinking, what will happen to Nigeria? What will happen to Ghana? This is US problem. You know? So if those guys are looking at themselves that way, why will you sit down here and be looking at those places to help you?
Okay, just in 30 seconds as we close, the next MPC meeting will be held in September. You have 2 more meetings to go for this year. How time flies, really? 2022 is almost over.
Yeah, it's almost
you know,
over.
So you have the September meeting and the November meeting. What's the outlook for September meeting? Very quickly.
I think the governor mentioned it in his last in the communique during the question and answer session that we're still looking at the numbers. MPC members are still looking at the numbers. The central bank is still looking at the numbers. It all depends on the trend of events. If the inflation numbers are still going up, you know, substantial. Like I said, the US has increased rate 4 times. Inflation has not gone down 1 time. You know, the same with Brazil and other countries that are, even the UK has 3 times. Inflation has not gone down 1. So they keep going. It does not mean that the MPC will be increasing rate in perpetuity. But as the fundamentals change, as the, you know, we start seeing some, you know, positive outcome in terms of the efficacy of those tools, then there will definitely be an adjustment.
Okay, let's see how it goes. But what an average Nigerian, or what any Nigerian wants, not even an average Nigerian, because
Yes,
I know
all
that inflation
Nigerians.
is impacting, whether you're a big man or not. If
Yeah.
this inflation is eating
Yeah.
deep into everybody's pocket, what we all want to know is that the monies in our pocket really buy more goods and
For
have
us.
more value.
Yes.
So thank you, Dr. Mahmud, for coming. Hope to see you again soon. We still have a show to do together,
Yes,
but
yes.
we'll talk about that later. All right, that's the much we can take today. So it's actually a wrap. Thank you all for your company today. Please join me again tomorrow on this channel. I am Nancy Naji, and I've been speaking with Dr. Hassan Mahmud. How can I forget? He's the Director, Monetary Policy Department at the Central Bank of Nigeria. And we've been looking at the MPC's decisions the morning after. At least we have the next few days or the next few weeks to see how the markets react to those decisions, the capital market and as well the money market. I'll see you all again tomorrow. God willing, be the best you can be and be that change that you want to see. I am Nancy Naji. Bye now.